couple more primitives, solid or cylinders. Again, these are going to allow me to type in parameters here in the inspector bar fields, and I'll remind everybody, when you're drawing in TurboCAD, whatever you're doing in TurboCAD, you should always look in the lower left hand corner here in what we call the status line. This is a very important part of TurboCAD. It will always give you instructions about what the application's expecting you to do next. So in the case of the cylinder here, I'll actually put it over here, start drawing. I can set a point for the radius. I can do this manually. I can come in alternatively and type in a radius of 3 and hit enter, and now wants a base object radius or a circumference or a height, and so I'll just put those parameters in there and hit enter. And if I highlight this with the selection arrow and look at the parameters, we see that in fact my base radius was 3 and my height was 6, which is exactly what I was typing into the status line and inspector bar fields. So I showed you how to change colors up here in the properties menu. We can do that. We can also do that in the tool palette here. So if I want a different color, I can do that. And the primitives, when you click on them, another thing to notice is they will be listed as the primitive type. So cylinder is a cylinder up here, this torus will be a torus, and the sphere will be a sphere. In the case of solids, if you and you'll need to do this from time to time, and we'll get a little bit into that later. If you do need to explode it, what happens is it becomes an ACES solid in this case, and this should become a surface, since I believe it was a surface, and sure enough it becomes a TC surface. So kind of understanding what types of objects you're working with is really critical in TurboCAD. So I just want to remind everybody to make use of this selection info palette. It will always give you hints about why certain things happen or don't happen as you expect them in TurboCAD. And a lot of times it just boils down to what types of objects you're working with. So in addition to that, or with that said, I will also go a little bit into some different object types and also combine that with understanding workplanes. So in the case of workplanes, you can always right click and show and hide the workplane, and when you do that you'll get this red rectangle, and that'll actually change depending on where the workplane is. So if I right click here and say workplane by facet, click on this facet, notice I get the indicator that the workplane is now there. If I want to set that back to the world plan, which is the default, or plane by world, I can right click and say plane by world. Okay, and that works the same across the board, whether you're working with Pro or Deluxe or Expert. And then if in the case of drawing 2D objects, which obviously primitives are great for drawing very specific object types, but in most cases you'll need to learn how to draw 2D objects, close profiles, and learn how to extrude and otherwise create 3D objects from these. So let's just start with the basics. We'll start with the circle here, and because this is a 2D object, it is always going to draw on whatever the current work plane is. So in this case, if I draw wherever I draw, even if I snap to this object here, and I'll turn on a snap mode here to show you, here's mid snap. I'm going to snap to what appears to be the top midpoint on this rectangle, but look in fact where it snaps to. It snaps to the bottom snap. I'll do that again so you can see it. So I'm thinking based on the on-screen information that I've got, that I'm going to click here, and in fact the object starts drawing here, and the reason for that is because it's on the work plane. So another example of that would be if we want to draw on the side of this box here. I will right click, say work plane by facet, choose this close face, and we'll do the same thing. Let's draw a circle here, and sure enough it is right on the side of the face of that box. And so what happens, and this is kind of one of the biggest gotchas in TurboCAD, one of the things that is most confusing to users, is when and why that work plane changes. So I'm going to right click and make sure that I'm using my 2D selector mode here. I can tell it's using the 3D selector mode because the 3D properties are here, but I'm going to toggle it and make sure that I'm using my 2D selector. If I right click now, this now says 2D selector properties, so that's kind of a visual or on-screen indication of which selector mode is active. And now watch what happens when I click on the circle that I drew here on the world plan plane. Is I will, and that should have worked, hey? Well, actually notice that with the 3D selector, the work plane stayed the same. Now that I'm going to change it to a 2D selector, the work plane changes to that object's work plane. So similarly, if I want to choose this circle that's drawn on the side of the box, I'm going to get this message here saying that the 2D selector mode is going to change the work plane, and sure enough, it's back to the work plane there. And where this becomes important is if you're not sure where your work plane is and you're going along clicking stuff and you're not showing the work plane, and you're not showing this message because a lot of people turn that off, you will have a problem because you're not going to be sure where you're drawing next. So if I don't have the indicators up and I've closed that message and I start drawing, well, I think that's drawing over here. It looks like it's drawing on the far side of that box, but sure enough, it's drawing parallel to this circle here, and that's because the work plane is again set to this side of this 3D object. So that's one of the key things that people need to understand when they're working in 3D is where is my work plane, and in addition what selector mode I have on, because the difference between the 2D selector mode and the 3D selector mode is this. So let me turn this back to the 3D selector mode, and I think this should work. Now when I click on the circle on the world plan work plane, notice the work plane indicator stays on the side of the box, and that is because when you're in the 3D mode, no matter 3D selector mode will not change the current work plane. So that is in fact where the most confusion when drawing in 3D occurs, in my opinion. Hopefully everybody understands that. If you need me to go over that again, we can certainly do that. Once you've got a 2D profile drawn, in this case this circle here that I've drawn on the side of the box, then I can use some of the 3D profile creation tools such as the simple extrude. So I'll look down in my status bar. It tells me select an entity to extrude. I'm going to choose the circle, and now I can either manually draw and extrude this, or I can of course put in a height by hitting the tab key and typing, and I'll type -10. Okay, and then we get this object here, and let's just change the colors of these so we're looking a little brighter here. John, this is actually a good question for you. I don't know what most people do if you get this kind of tessellation looking stuff here. This is an indicator that two objects are coplanar. They're sharing the same face in this case. Now, a lot of times when I work in 3D, I prefer to take the 3D selector and slide this out just ever so slightly. Let me turn off my snap modes here and slide that out ever so slightly, because in the next move what I'd like to do is do a 3D subtraction. So I'm going to choose the object that I want. I'm going to get rid of this cylinder, and this is the first time I'm using this, so it will tell me, give me a message of whether I want to keep the part tree on or leave it off. In this case I don't want to turn it off, so I will say no to this. And now what happens is if I select the box after fully doing the 3D subtraction, then the part tree will tell me that this is now a part and let me know the objects in that part tree. The part tree is a pro-only feature. It's probably the top pro-only feature when it comes to 3D modeling, aside from the solids that you get. when working in TurboCAD. And the reason that that's important is because now, even though I've done my 3D Boolean here, I can go to any of the objects in that and change that. So if we just look at this here, in fact, if I go to the circle here.
Normally you could leave that on the face, both faces.
Yeah, I've seen times where it gets a little bit funky in that you'll go somewhere down the line and you'll get some faceting stuff occurring. So just to kind of recap for people, what we're talking about here is if you do a normal extrude and you get this tessellated stuff, it is an indicator that the
both faces are
coplanar, right? So if I do the same 3D subtraction, and actually one other thing I want to do, let me undo that move. I want to explain one other thing here, and I think if I hit the extrude, one other pro feature that is very common to use and important in this use case is this use compound profile. Actually, I don't know that it'll do that. Okay, so now when I do my subtraction and I click on the object here, we should see a little different. If I highlight the circle and change the radius of this circle to, let's do that 0.6, make it a little bit bigger, the hole will actually get bigger here, 0.6. Okay, but in the case of using the compound profile, this one here, because I used the compound profile when I changed the radius of the circle that the extrusion was based on, the hole gets a little bit bigger. In the case of this circle over here where I extruded and did not use compound profile, no matter what I do, I can make that circle bigger and it's not going to impact the hole that I cut in here because the associativity is not there. So when you're doing an extrusion and you do want to make full use of the part tree, doing it with the use compound profile option is very important to understand. So that's the basic principle of using 2D objects. So I'll get into a little bit more complexity here with 2D objects, and I'll just Control A and select everything and delete to clear my screen. So now let's get into a little bit more complex object types. So I'm going to go to my 3D polyline. Notice again where and I'm in world plan view. I know this because up here it says world plan, and also I've clicked on the icon for world plan. Now when I draw, it'll get weird looking because my work plane is set still to the side of the box from the last move. So let's right click, choose plane by world. Now when I draw my polyline, that looks a little bit more normal. So that's another place where you'll notice the work plane will have a bearing on what you're doing. Let's turn geos on here and we can kind of freehand draw something a little bit. With the polyline tool, you can right click and choose line or arc segments, and choose a line segment here. Holding the shift key down will lock a line segment into an ortho mode. So if I go up here or go down here, it's locked into those ortho modes. And now I'll right click and say close. And now let's choose the extrusion tool, and I'll extrude this, and sure enough I get a nice closed object. So part of what we talked about last week, the importance of having a closed object. So let's just go here. I'm going to undo the extrusion. So we're back to our polyline, and now I'm going to explode the polyline. So I'll click it, choose this explode button over here, and notice what that did in the selection info palette is it exploded the entire object. So it's now a series of lines and polylines and arcs. So this is an arc segment. If I turn off all, then I just see what I'm selecting only. And so we've got a series of lines and arc segments. Now a lot of people will draw whatever it is they're trying to model or create using line segments and arc segments and splines or whatever 2D object they think best suits their needs. But what can happen is if you are not careful, and in fact let's see, let's explode this one more time, or here I'll actually explode this one more time. Notice this is still a polyline, so if I explode it a second time, now it's all lines. And what will happen a lot of times when you're not being careful is, let's turn off snaps and come down here, and in the case of eyeballing stuff or not using your snaps or getting segments that are broken, in fact let me just pull this back so it's back here. So if I'm zoomed out and I'm looking at this object and I go, okay, my object is done, and I'm not paying close attention to here where it's broken, if I choose the join polyline tool, which is what people will commonly use, and in fact I'll make it turn on the auto joining. Now when I click on this, notice it's one polyline again. Okay, so I've gone and done what I think is correct. Now watch what happens when I do the extrusion here. I'm going to choose that same simple extrude. This time I'll be smart and change the color before I do it. And now when I extrude this, watch what happens is I'll click on the line there. And in fact, with compound profile on, it acts a little bit different. It's telling me to finish the selection, which I do. But when I do this and come here, what happened? Why is this not a solid object? Why am I only getting the extruded sides of this object? And that is because the polyline is not closed. So let's go back and undo that. And the way you fix this would be to simply come in here, right click this. I'm going to actually choose that, delete that by holding the control key down when I left click my mouse, and I'll choose close, and that should fix the problem. So let's just go back to this extrusion tool, and now we'll extrude this again, and sure enough, when I come to my render mode, my object is closed again. So moral of the story is really having to understand when an object is closed, when it's not, and the impact that it'll have on your ability to create the 3D object that you're looking to create. Okay, one other thing I will actually show now that I think about it is the compound profile tool also has another important aspect to it. So let's just take a circle here, and we will use one of our copy tools since it's selected here. I'll do a little array fit copy, and let's just say I want to have 3 rows and 2 columns. I'll click here and boom, and now when I use the simple extrude tool with the use of the compound profiles, watch what happens here. This is really nice. So I'll click this outer object, and now I'll click the circles by holding my shift key down. Notice a plus minus sign that lets me choose which ones I want to toggle and choose. I've got them all selected, so now when I do my extrusion here, lo and behold, what I get is this object here. And again, these are all compound profiles, so if I click on any of the circles and want to make a change to any of them, it should increase the size of that or decrease the size of that particular hole. In fact, let me just check that because I don't remember turning that off. Okay, well, I'm surprised by that. John, do you know?
No, I don't know anything.
I don't. Okay, well, I'll have to. Luckily, I got that recorded, so I can go back and look at that. But yeah, I'm surprised that actually didn't create a part tree part. Maybe it was because let's go back and undo that and do my extrusion. Do that. And okay. Yeah, that to me looks like it should have created a part tree.
No.
No,
If you you have to do something like Boolean.
Oh, okay, okay. Right, okay. So let's just try doing something like that, and then let's just put something. Turn on snap mode here. Get it on here. Okay, and now let's go boom and boom, and now this will be a part. Hey. And sure enough, and then if we look at the simple extrude and then I click the edit content, I should be able to have access to the circles there. That's actually one thing that bugs me a little bit about the part tree when you do an extrusion of multiple objects like that. Let's choose one of these circles here.
You can pick it up and move it.
Yeah, actually I can, right? So even the associativity, if I choose that circle, I think.
Yeah, you gotta get the circle.
Yeah, if I choose the circle, no.
Well, see what happens when you put it down.
Let's try the 2D selector mode here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. In any event, what I do know I can do is to come here and select that object and then select the circle and change the radius of that to 0.5, and that should, yeah, I'm telling you, the associativity is just not there. Oh, it did. Finally refreshed there. So, let's just undo that so it looks right. Okay, so we've covered the necessity for us to have closed polylines. We've covered the part tree, although my example wasn't the greatest. If I do it a different way here, this is actually the way when using the part tree that I prefer to do it. So I'll just do a quick little part here, and then we'll do a simple extrude, and again with compound profile on in this case. I'll work that, and then let's do a couple of other extrusions here. Boom, boom. I've done them individually. Now I'll come here and go get rid of these. So we've got the holes. Okay, and now when I look at this in the part tree info, to John's point, I should be able to select that circle and I believe move it. So let's just try moving that. So again, because of the associativity with the part in the part tree, when I click the circle and move it, the hole goes with it. So just kind of another example of when you want to use the part tree, understanding the associativity and the compound profile relationship can be very, very important. Alright, so now what I'll get into a little bit more is the rendering, because I know a lot of people wonder about the rendering stuff. Let's just get rid of those objects here, and I'll simplify things by creating another primitive. And if I go to my design director here, I'm going to actually turn off all my lights because this will be the default mode. In fact, let's just delete all those lights. So this is the default mode when you, a lot of times when the first time you render something, you'll get a message saying that you need to add some lights to your drawing here. So light sources are missing. Do you want to set default light sources? Now this is interesting to note. I'm in an isometric mode right now, so when I add these lights here and I spin my object around, the back side of the object is dark. And the reason that is because I was in isometric mode, and when I added these lights here, in particular the point lights, if we make these visible and look at this from a top view, notice all these lights are on the sides here. If I undo this, actually I'll get rid of these lights here. That's I think I gotta do it that way. I'm going to highlight the 4 point lights and say delete. And now watch when I do the same thing here from this top view, world plan view. Actually, let me get rid of all the lights to demonstrate this. So again, when I come and I render this, I'm going to again be told my light sources are missing. So this time I'm going to add the lights here in this top view. And sure enough, let's look at the position of these 4 point lights. So if we highlight those and make those visible, hey, look at that. Now they're all 4 corners. And if I come here and spin my object around, the object is more evenly lit. And that is because the position of the point lights is determined by the view that I'm in. So in whatever isometric view I was in, the lights will be on one side or the other, and when I'm in a top view or world plan view, the lights are automatically positioned in the extents of the object here, so the object is more evenly lit. So that'll be a little bit tricky as you're going through and adding lights to your drawing. Now these are the OpenGL lights. These are the standard lights for more of the high-end renderings, and in particular for the Red SDK rendering. You really do want to use Luminance objects. So what do I mean by luminance? If I draw a sphere, typically I like to use a sphere object. I'm just going to draw a little sphere here, and let's look at this from a front view. Go to my 3D selector, and I'll just bring this puppy up here. Okay, and I guess I'll get rid of these point lights again. And now one of the options when you're working in TurboCAD, if you've looked at the properties pages here, you will be able to add what is called a luminance object. So in the case of a single object in Red SDK mode here, let's just add a single point light. Okay, and actually what I like to do as well whenever I'm doing this kind of thing is I like to come here and draw another object down below, so you get a little bit of shadow here. So let's look at this from the side. I'm going to drop this down a little bit. Okay, and now I'm going to turn these other lights off, and so when I go into draft mode, I get this, and if I look at this in one of the quality render modes like Ray Trace Standard here, I know that this is too bright because it's all washed out here. So let me, one other thing I'm going to do is bring this here and put it on a layer, call this Loom, just to show you the difference. So if I put that on this layer and now I hide this, oh, what happened? My drawing is black, and that's because there are no lights. Even though there's lights here, they're off. If I turn one of these on, you'll see what happens here. So this is an OpenGL light. Let's turn a couple of these on, and I would have thought something lit up, hey?
ambient and headlights the only ones that are going to work?
Yeah, so I'm surprised that didn't actually light up, but maybe, yeah. Headlight. Oh, you can kind of see it. It's just very, very bright. So it was this headlight here that I turned on. And again, these are kind of dependent on the position of the lights. But you can now see that there's a little bit of color to there, and you can actually brighten things up and add power through these properties here in this. But if I again turn this headlight off, now I'm like, why is everything dark? And that is because the layer with the luminance object on here is set to invisible. If I turn that on, now everything's washed out. Whenever you see this washed out effect, what that typically means is there's just simply too much power in the lighting object. So if I come in here, go to the properties, and then look at the intensity of this light, wow, that's set to 16. That's just way too high. So we'll turn that down. Come here, say OK. That looks a little bit better. Okay, so again, the point that I'm trying to make is that the luminance objects, especially when it comes to red SDK rendering, those are really what are going to give you the most realistic looking lights available. So you will, if you're going to use the red SDK rendering engine, you will need to make use of these here. The last thing to talk about when it comes to rendering, or not the last thing, but the last thing I'm going to talk about today is adding materials. So this is something that a lot of people ask about and have questions about. So in the case of selected objects, if I've got my materials palette over here and I choose any of these materials, let's just try a metal here. We'll try this iron color. Notice that when I click on that, the object color changes. And again, if I go to a quality render, we should see a little bit higher quality look, and you also get some shadowing effect. This is why I like to have kind of a flat surface at the bottom. You see this shadow here is the shadow coming from the luminance object through this box, and the shadows cast here down on the object. So again, if I select an object and want to add a material to it, and it's just a simple object, I can easily do that through the materials palette, choosing any one of these. I can also, of course, come in to here, right click, go to properties, and set my materials here. As of 2016, the active drawing materials are on by default, and you'll notice this iron materials one that I've already added to an object in my drawing. That's what that active drawing means. If I want to choose a different one, we'll just try one of these. I can actually, by the way, hit the down arrow and it will cycle through these materials here until I find one that I like. Let's maybe go with this one here. Now when I say OK, boom, now I've got that. Now let's do a quality render again. Whoops, sorry, as soon as I moved, lost that. And there you go, and you can actually see the reddish color being reflected by the metal here. So this is now turned into a little bit of a red color because of the material that I'm using and the shadow and the reflectance of the object. Okay, and let me just pop open the thing here. I think we've got a bunch of questions here, so I apologize for the delay in getting to some of these. Okay, I have the Lightworks plugin. Lynn, since you purchased the Lightworks plugin for Pro, you should have received, and if you have not, email me. You should receive the free updated installer to Lightworks. So we'll make sure that you're taken care of there. Again, once you've purchased the Lightworks plugin, it's free to you going forward. You just simply need to contact us whenever you upgrade and get the latest installer for that. Don, this was using Red SDK. I didn't have Lightworks installed since the build that I put on my machine yesterday. You're also asking when you extrude, does it leave a copy of the 2D object? Yes, absolutely. I think you kind of saw that stuff. Lynn, the compound profile option is available in the Extrude, and that is down here in the um, inspector bar. You can also right click anytime you see these sub options in TurboCAD. You can right click and they'll be available here in the local menu as well. John, thanks for being here. Okay, and then a couple other things on rendering that I'll just get to. And unfortunately, when I rebooted my machine this morning, I lost a couple of these links. But if we go to the TurboCAD Forum again, I do want to point out a couple of things here. First and foremost is the discussion on rendering. If you go into the galleries here, there's a couple of nice images that you can take a look at. And if you look at this jet engine link, and actually there's a movie to see how it's done, and there's another link actually here. And in fact, Majo, who's one of our power users and probably the leading authority on rendering in Red SDK, has not only rendered this, but he's made the file available here if you follow these links. So you can actually go and grab this engine that was made and render it yourself. So I will post this link in the chat window. Okay, and you can go and check that out. And I do know he also, Majo, that is also just recently in Tips and Tricks, created another Red SDK tutorial here where you get this nice cabinet. And again, he's been kind enough to include the file that he used, so you can check it out and kind of take it apart. So I'll give you an example here. If I open this, I think I should have, and this is the jet engine that I downloaded from the web, from the user forum. Okay, and I won't go through rendering it. It'll take a long time to do that. We've got a couple of layers actually here that are on that I can turn off. But what I do want to point out is that you can go through this file and kind of reverse engineer it. So if we go into Luminance here, I'm sure in active drawing we see the two Luminance objects that he has added. And in fact, if I, as I was explaining earlier, when I do a draft rendering of this, it's just going to be very dark, and that's because none of the lights are on at all. So the drawing that you see in the forum is done purely through the Luminance objects. And once this comes about, it'll probably be black. The other thing to point out, okay, so again, this is you're actually seeing the Luminance objects in here. I thought they were spheres, but maybe he used a different type of object. But again, because I'm using Red SDK and I'm only using Luminance objects, I don't have any of these ambients on. The draft mode will look a little bit weird. I think we can probably turn the headlight on to work in draft mode. That's normally what I tend to do. And again, if I bump this up, I'll get a little more light here. The headlight is directly in there. So he's got his Luminance objects in there. And the other thing I want to point out when it comes to rendering and understanding lighting is that the rendering, and this is the case with both Red SDK and with Lightworks, is that you'll need to understand environments. And so environments here, in this case, he's actually using what we call HDR lighting. So there's actually an HDR file, which is a specific lighting type of file, environment file that he's using in this case. So it is highly recommended that you go and download this jet engine, take a look at it, and kind of rip it apart as far as reverse engineering it to kind of understand how this is set up and why it works the way it does. And you can see the results if you go back to the forum and look at the link for the engine. just how incredibly gorgeous he got this looking. And similarly with this cabinet here, same type of deal. You'll just go in and be able to kind of reverse engineer. If you've got any questions on either of the topics, absolutely ask your questions here, because these are fantastic ways to learn the ins and outs of Red SDK. We've got similar stuff for Lightworks as well on the forum. In fact, there's a couple of users, John and Henry Hubick in particular, that are very consistent forum participants. They will be happy to advise you and get you pointed in the right direction when it comes to rendering. All right. Well, that's about all I have to say today. I'll open up the chat window, and again, if you guys have any questions and you want to turn on your microphones, I think you can do that. I don't believe I actually muted anybody's mic, so I'm happy to take your questions either verbally, or if you want to chat something in the chat window, please feel free to do that. And I hope that you all benefited from today's webinar. I also hope, thank you again for your patience in getting going after the Windows update that I had to apply. Again, I will type my email address in here, so if either anybody wants to follow up with me via email, you can do that. And I would also encourage you to become a forum member. We're constantly looking at the forums. And thank you very much for participating in our webinar. I will get this added to our YouTube channel as soon as possible. And thanks very much for your participation. I guess you're very welcome, Lynn. Nice meeting you, even if virtually. Okay, very good. We will continue to expand on our webinar series, so please save the link that you have. For now, we're going to continue to use that same link every week, and hopefully we'll see you back here again soon. All right, thanks everybody, and talk to you later.